Hail, hail, the Celts are here, and what the hell do we care now? We're just about to come out of the international break, and this felt like a great opportunity to have a look at where the squad is sitting right now, given everything that's went on with the board meeting up with the fan collective, the aftermath of the transfer window, and all the kind of the furore around the Europa League, the balance of the squad, and everything else. To take an opportunity to look at exactly where the squad is and think if we had two transfers to lock in ahead of January that could fix Celtic, what positions would they be, and who are the players we would go after. In the video today we'll have a look at really where the squad does sit, and we're going to try and knock down some of those dominoes that we know that are about to fall, to really think where is the transfer strategy, where should the focus and the attention of the Celtic, the powers that be, if that's the way of thinking about it in this case, where their attention, where their focus will be, knowing what we do know about some of the players that we have, we don't have, we might be losing, and all that other good stuff. At any point in the video, if you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and get into the comment section in this one and let me know where you think, if Celtic had to make two signings to fix the squad, what positions they would be in, and if you have any personal recommendations of individual players, of course, always let them be shared in the comment section. Always love adding new names and faces into the chat. And yeah, let's just get stuck straight into this one, because videos like this are fun just to get straight into the deep end with, and really just go back over what we know already about the squad, think about some of the context we've seen with some of the matches, some of the little tactical innovations we've seen in some of the recent matches where we could improve what's worked well for us, etc. This is the Celtic squad depth as we find it at point of recording, and we've said this before when looking at the depth overall, that we certainly have numbers now, and we certainly have, like, when you look at defence, pretty much free to a position everywhere, which is pretty comprehensive. The level of the depth and how good it gets as you go down the pecking order is maybe up for discussion, maybe a wee bit of topic for debate. But I think overall, like, if you were to say this is the Celtic defensive department for the season ahead, it's hard to be really that upset or that disappointed with the defence we have, and I think that's really been evident in the matches we've seen so far with the actual performances on the pitch, not just the names on paper or anything like that. We've not even had Trusty, he's been out through injury, we've not really had the best of Tierney, and between the likes of Murray and Donovan, we've had this lovely kind of invigorating kind of underbelly second string effort that is lifting the level of expectation, I think, for even the likes of Ralston, to maybe even some extent Carter Vickers, for they've got to really jostle for position, they've got to really earn their shirt despite the situations where it feels like they're going to be more nailed on to start. The midfield is where the conversation does become a bit more interesting, because the midfield in particular is very much the focus, I think, for a lot of Celtic fans when it comes to the transfer policy, for why it's not been working out, or why it's season upon season, window after window, feeling like it's just absent-minded. Because between Callum McGregor, Paulo Bernardo, Arnie Engels, we don't have a defensive midfielder. We don't have a guy that can sit at the base of the team and dictate the tempo, as well as have that kind of nose for danger to be able to snuff out counter-attacks effectively. McGregor's okay at it, and I think we've seen good points and bad points from McGregor at being that defensive shield. Sometimes he's very good at it, sometimes he's just not at it, and as we know, that's not really his bag. It's not really been what his game has been about in his career up to this point. So it's not really something we hold against him necessarily, but it's simply just not using him to the best visibility. And from what we've seen with Bernardo and Engels, like, as much as physically they maybe look like they could occupy that space maybe a bit more comfortably, they are themselves not that type of player. This is a role that you do need somebody that is hungry to be in the engine room, that wants to slide across the pitch and stop a ball getting through the lines, or getting up to a winger, that kind of thing, as well as having the eye for a pass to play the ball forward and keep the team attacking. And that's maybe the attribute that all these guys do actually have in common, that they can kind of read the game well, and when they get on the ball within one or two touches, they can make good decisions, they can play killer balls. Do they always do it? No. Do they do it as much as we would want? Probably no. But I think we've seen, especially from McGregor this year, game on game incremental improvements in that regard. We then flip around to the other side of the midfield, and when you look at Hatate, McCowan and Negren, again, you've got very similar type of guy across the two positions that this is supposed to occupy in the midfield. Negren seems somewhat ever present, as does Hatate. McCowan has his role. He's actually had two roles this season, but I think we all kind of know where you get the most out of McCowan domestically. And yeah, the balance, the cohesion in this department in terms of the styles all coupling together, weaknesses accounting for other people's strengths, and all that kind of thing isn't really there. And although we can dominate the ball, our midfield can look fantastic, and individually probably every one of them on their day is capable of being a match winner. We don't have the engine room. We don't have the heartbeat really established in the team. Maybe to the same way that the defence feels quite, like if we were to play any combination of back four really out of everyone that's there, I think we would all quite contently get through whatever game it is that's in hand. Whereas with the midfield, there's not that many combinations, I don't think, that work, and I don't think there's that many combinations that will win matches and be like highly effective. Some of them you might want to be a bit more defensive or a bit more pragmatic, that kind of thing, and Celtic have done that before in Europa League this year. It's maybe something that's less pertinent. But when we then kind of stretch up and look at the forward line, we have got left wingers coming out the huzza. Now, this is the point of the video where I do want to knock down some of those dominoes that we mentioned in the intro, because we do all highly expect that Daizen Maeda is going to be leaving the building in January. He was all but gone in the summer, and that became a little bit of a storyline in the aftermath of the summer window. So I think you could easily expect Daizen Maeda to be leaving in the January window, and that's just something I now want to kind of add into the conversation a little bit here, as well as with Yang. Yang is not really playing anymore since the close of the window. He's featured once or twice, but I think with the introduction of Balikwisha to Netke, eventually when Jota returns, we've also got Forrest. Negren did a bit of has had a versatile kind of switch around the positions. I think we're probably going to see Yang leave the club as well, and that will kind of thin out the herd on the left-hand side. Now, we still do have 3 designated left wingers. Tuneke has not played and doesn't look like he's going to play on the right. Balikwisha will not play on the right, according to Brendan. And Jota has played on the right and probably will, to accommodate these 2 guys if they can really nail down that side of the pitch. And I think Jota is pretty effective on the right and effective on the left. He's very, very good. Prefers to be on the left. I think we've all seen that in his 2 parts of his Celtic career. And then another domino I just want to knock on top of this as well is Paulo Bernardo, because I do feel that the appearances that he got this season off the bench and from the start almost drop himself into that Lager BLK, that Mike Naroki protocol of, this is a guy that is just right on the fringe of the squad that we want to try and move on in the market somehow, and we need to give him some meaningful minutes. We need to give him a highlights package for his agent to put together so that he can go out and get him moved on. You might remember Lager BLK played and scored against Feyenoord, and then after that it was quite easy for us to loan him into Holland and eventually sell him into Portugal. And Mike Naroki, as you'll remember, randomly just got minutes for a couple of games. And again, we don't have him at Celtic Park anymore. So I do feel that Bernardo is in that kind of state at the moment, and I'm just going to go on a limb and back up my own hunch in that regard, that we'll have 3 exits in January: Bernardo, Maeda and Yang. I personally don't, and I've said this 1,000 times and I'll say it again, and I hate repeating myself on the channel, but I just don't see anyone coming for Hatate. I don't see Hatate having an offer on the table that will enhance his chances of getting into the World Cup squad. I don't see Hatate having an offer out there that financially dramatically changes his life. I don't see us receiving an offer for Hatate that makes a lot of sense to move him on in a January window. Hatate had a lovely interview, or some quotes that came out in the summer, where he was talking about how much he values winning in his career. When you retire, you've only got medals to look back on, that kind of attitude. And like, again, he's going to be doing that this season if he's at his best and he's playing for us. I don't think Hatate is a January departure that's likely to happen. The rest of the team all feels pretty nailed on. Could we see something like Shin maybe go out on loan? I wouldn't rule that out at all, because he's just so cut adrift from the team. Maybe a little bit similar to Inamura, but they're kind of like tertiary issues we're not really too worried about. So once we kind of knock some dominoes down and we get back up to speed with really where the squad is at, the 2 primary areas of the pitch that we want to focus on is defensive midfield. And I really do mean defensive midfield, because if the midfield does thin out a little bit, and who knows what will happen with some of these other players, we want to be getting McGregor into this advanced role here. Could Hatate leave in the summer? I wouldn't rule it out. Could Engels maybe even leave in the summer? Not impossible, but probably not something that's on the likely scale, as it were. But McGregor operating in this area of the pitch cannot continue to be the plan any longer than it absolutely needs to be. And the next knock-on effect of outgoing transfers in the midfield, Hatate and Engels, whenever they happen, have to facilitate McGregor getting back into one of these more dynamic midfield positions here, and we get an actual guy who can play in this area of the pitch to play in that area of the pitch. We can then get a lot more out of everyone else in the team. And I also think the other position we need, of course, is our right winger. Now, Jota isn't a player we need to upgrade or replace or anything like that, but we really just don't have a right winger. And whether Jota is going to come into this side and be first choice, or he gets shifted onto the left, maybe some other kind of solutions might happen. In the fullness of time, we'll kind of discover that. But make no mistake about it, you can't, cross your fingers on this. We need a right winger, just flat out. We don't have one. I did say this to, I think it might have been Paul John, or I can't remember, it was McBride on the CSC on the Thursday night stream, where I think the board really thought they were replacing Kuhn with Negren. I think they really believed he was a right winger. And if you can imagine that he was being as effective as he has been playing as a right winger. Now, he does pop up in these areas of the pitch, which is why I think a lot of people would have thought bringing him in. He could have done that role for us, but Brendan wants a bit more pace. He wants tenacity. He wants energy in that final third. He wants good delivery, which Negren can give. But Negren, he wants to be on the ball. He wants to get in this area here, and that natural urge just will not leave him. So he's just not going to figure for Brendan Rodgers in the right wing area. Now, sadly, as I come to record this video, one of the players I've been kind of championing on this channel for, I think about the last 2 years or so, feels like the cat is out the bag now and he's not going to be anywhere near within our grasp anymore, and that is Obed Vargas of the Seattle Sounders. This guy is only 20 years of age and has been playing at a really high level since the age of 16, 17. He's won the Champions League in his region, he's won the league in his region, he's won everything over there. Seattle Sounders are one of the bigger clubs, but he particularly plays in the exact role, in the exact position of everything we're looking for. And over the last couple of days, he's had a bit of a breakout season. He's just been named the top under-22 player in MLS at 20 years of age. And this is like his second or third season at the top level, at professional soccer level or whatever. And now it's very much the good and the great of European and world football, from your Chelseas, your Ajaxes, PSVs, and everyone else is now all swanning in to go after this guy, and it's certainly not going to be within our price category anymore, sadly. And now that we know a little bit more after listening to going through, dissecting the minutes of the meeting that the board had with the Celtic Fans Collective, as well as all the other information that's been publicly available for a while, we know that Celtic have these little soft budgets, these little thresholds where they need to email for authorisation and everything else. And if anyone in the Celtic transfer department is watching this video and you don't want to send that email authorisation, the number one defensive midfielder I would put my name on, I would do absolutely it. This guy would just work for us. I just don't see there being any two ways about it. It's not going to be anyone you're anywhere near familiar with, but someone I know very, very well, and that is Nicolás Acevedo. This guy played for New York City for about 2 or 3 years, won everything with them, moved to Brazil. He's been there on loan for 2 years. He's only just made the move permanent, and this is a defensive midfielder that really does embody everything for what we need in the squad. Because what we need in this department here is a guy that just loves defending, a guy that has an absolute nose for danger, which Acevedo does. But what Acevedo is shown whenever I've watched him, he is an excellent football player. And he's a guy that whenever, I've seen him for New York and they were being super dominant, he's a player that can get into the final third, play final balls, but is an ultimate defensive midfielder. He's not going to get ahead of his station. He's not going to try and do too much too intricately, where he's really trying to be the playmaker and be the centre of attention. He just really knows that my job is to protect the defence and move the ball into the attackers. And as you can see at the moment, he's not exactly nailed on in his team at the moment. And this play pattern is really what we are looking for. We're not looking to kick McGregor out the team. Our midfield is still quite busy. We're not looking for someone to come in who's necessarily going to completely rock the boat and be a real problem. Like if you think about the left wingers, where we've got about 4 of them, and it's problematic. This is a guy that could quite simply switch into the squad, come off the bench almost every game for McGregor, and then be rotated to start in his place as we rotate other players, or as other players transfer around, he can naturally come in to eventually own that position. These are his performances out of 100. Coming off the bench, these are significant scores, because he is getting involved in tackles, duels, interceptions, and being a really effective player. He's got lots of winners' medals from the Uruguayan division, a little bit in Brazil, and also from MLS as well. A guy that knows what it takes to win. Now, he does have a really big contract, because technically he did only just join them in January after a 2-year loan spell, but they only paid just under €3 million for him. And this is a guy that isn't really getting into their team, and this is a player I suspect we could sign quite easily if we put an offer in, because Bahia, although they're a Man City team, they're very FFP minded. They want to turn over money. They want to turn over players. This guy's not really getting into their team right now. But even if you use the CeltsAreHere link as something there, help him kind of bed in if we were to sign him in January. This is a player that I think would jump at the chance to come to Europe, is a player that would jump at the chance to play Europa League for Celtic and would see himself be able to flourish and grow in his career being at Celtic, and that's the sort of player that we want in. And given his current squad status, his play style and his transfer value, this is a guy that could come in and be a fantastic defensive midfielder for us that really just ticks all the boxes that as fans we want to see from a player on the pitch, but would also actually probably satisfy a lot of the ridiculous protocols and thresholds and budgets that the club is restricting itself with at the moment. Would I love us to sign Acevedo? Probably not, but I would, you know, if we're going to be going into that marketplace of kind of like the Nicolás profile, like a guy that burst onto the scene maybe somewhere at some point, looked like he was going to be a real prospect, but never really found the right place at the right time to, you know, elevate their career to really kick on. I think Acevedo would really be a great fit for Celtic. I think it would be a transfer that would have very little chance of not working out, etc. I would want the club to spend a bit more money. I would want them to go for more of the finished article, more of the you know, the sure thing, as it were. And again, another player that I've really been trying to champion and really been trying to put his name out there in this kind of Celtic rumour mill cycle for just crossing our fingers and hoping we could do it, is Jack McGlynn. Now, Jack McGlynn, if you've been on the channel before, you know all about this guy already. Very impressive, almost, you know, kind of in terms of posture, stature, everything, really does have a lot of the Matt O'Reillys about him. But for Houston, he has been playing a lot of his football out in the right wing area. And before being at Houston, at Philadelphia, was a defensive midfielder in the true sense of the one that we're after. The interesting thing about Jack McGlynn is he was very close to making a deadline day summer transfer move to Anderlecht when we were on the cusp of doing the Dahlberg deal. They went after him and another player that I linked us to, if we were to just raid it when we did the MLS scouting video, the striker at New York City, Martinez. And those transfers, Anderlecht couldn't do them because they were, you know, they couldn't afford it essentially. So I think someone like McGlynn, you're probably looking at something like the 11 million euro mark or something like that. But I think this is a player that takes set pieces, has got a great football brain, and positionally and tactically would be a 2-for-1 for Celtic. Because if we look at the team and the squad the way it is right now, do we really need someone to come in for big money to upset this kind of dynamic here and give us more problems with our midfield positions? No, we want to spend that type of money on someone that can play in the right wing area. Now, McGlynn is much more of a similar right wing presence to what we see with Negren, but the way that McGlynn is actually deployed and the way he plays for Houston Dynamo is very similar to what we try and do or have tried to do in the past with guys like Hatate and Engels, where we just really pin them out there on the halfway, or pardon me, on the touchline, and through the rest of the team crunching over onto one side of the pitch, we're trying to tack down the left, and if it doesn't work, we've got McGlynn over here on the right, totally free with acres of space, and his delivery and his kind of, you know, penetration from that right wing area has been very noteworthy, very exceptional. As a guy that I think, again, similar to Acevedo, would jump at the chance to come to Celtic and would really grasp the opportunity with both hands. But if we were to have the return of Jota coming into right wing, somebody else gets injured, transfer situations, etc., the actual best position for McGlynn in this team would be in the midfield. Physically very similar to Arne Engels, like I mentioned already, maybe even Matt O'Reilly. And if you fast forward to Tate into the summer maybe leaving, could be a guy that, like McGlynn and Engels, would be a formidable midfield duo, even if you're maybe even factoring McGregor a little bit out of the equation and you've got Negren as the attack-based midfielder. Like, there could be some really lovely level-ups that could happen with a midfield like this. A guy that is only 22 years of age, and for all the hype and the furore and everything around Obed Vargas, Jack McGlynn is just much more of the proven thing. Now, Vargas has been doing it at a very good level in that defensive midfield role, but McGlynn is such a good footballer, he can actually be applied in a lot of different ways. And for a guy that has a huge range of passing, who isn't lightning quick, and I know Rodgers is going to want pace in the wide area, which is why I do hesitate for mentioning him in the right wing role, because if you kind of want that, you could get something similar from Negren. But McGlynn's delivery and his power is very different. It's very, you know, more pronounced is probably the best way I would put it. And again, for what we've seen from Rodgers wanting on this right wing role, that wouldn't be a bad 2-for-1 type solution for me if the club were going to kind of cheap out, spend 11 million on McGlynn, play him on the right wing for a lot of the time this season, And as other dominoes kind of maybe roll out into the summer window, you've then got him to come into midfield, and maybe you've done a bit more scouting, you've got another right winger or two that could maybe come in. Change of manager, change of shape. Who knows what happens as we record right now, to be quite honest. Now, the last defensive midfielder I want to mention, after I know Jack McGlynn kind of should be bridging us into the right wing, but I've maybe just got my ordering a little bit wrong here, is Yassine Tatrawi. This is a guy that we previewed in the summer and has been doing very, very well in Belgium this season, following on from a very impressive year last year. Again, a guy that plays in that defensive midfield role, the exact same sort of profile that we're seeing from Obed Vargas and from Nicolás Acevedo. A guy that gets right in amongst tackles, dribbles, interceptions, has a great range of forward passing as well, and can, when the game allows it, be a part of a dominant team that can get into the edge of the box and get some goal actions himself, goals, assists, etc. At 22 years of age, currently valued at €5 million, with a contract that's set to go until 2027 with an option of a further year, is again a transfer that's probably in that kind of €10 to €12 million range. Yeah, he's been there for a few years. They paid 1.2 million for him, so you're probably looking at maybe it could get done a little bit cheaper if there's like incentives and add-ons on the back of it. I don't think it needs to be a super expensive transfer, but Belgian teams don't really get their pants pulled down with players these days, and with the profile he's got, the physical attributes he's got, it's hard to imagine we would be the only team sniffing around him. So I just wanted to add him in there, because I know a lot of you guys that have been subscribed to the channel for a while like to hear about some of these players that we've mentioned before. You know, how are they progressing? Are they off the cards now? Because we've had a few of them, or any ones that are still live that maybe, you know, why are we not looking at this guy? Now, very similar to the Nicolás Acevedo, where if anyone from Celtic is watching this and they're thinking, I don't want to send an email, but I know we need to get some transfers done, the number one player for the right wing, number one, both these guys are kind of tied, right? And you'll see why in a second. The first one is Ivan Martín from Girona. Again, a player I am very, 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 very familiar with. I've been watched far too much La Liga over the last couple of years. This is a very versatile Spanish midfielder, and he has a lot of the same sort of tropes, the same sort of, you know, stereotypes that you would expect from a Spanish midfielder. Very good in tight spaces, very mobile, has a good range of passing, and has a bit of bite. You know, they're not scared to get into tackles and maybe win you some free kicks, as well as knowing when to chop down the opposition, that sort of thing. But Ivan Martín's played his best football for Girona, playing in the right wing position. Girona, again, another team that are associated quite closely to Man City, and it's funny how so many of these players that are in that City football group kind of space, play style wise and maybe availability wise, actually are players that we should be thinking about. But Girona, when they really rose up the table in La Liga and when they qualified and played in the Champions League, Ivan Martín was one of their most important players, make no mistake about it. And his most effective moments in the team were when he could play in the right wing position, supporting the striker. Now, the one thing you'll notice, or I noticed when watching this guy, is he presses like Daizen Maeda. And now I've not got the actual physical statistics, you know, from their heart monitors and stuff like that to be able to say that he's right in the same territory. But I know from watching him, this guy is a pressing machine, and this is a player that on the right wing for Celtic would at the very least give us that Daizen energy back into the front line here. This is a guy that is very, very selfless, a very good team player, and somebody that's very familiar with this role of getting, you know, into a press position to help a natural goal scorer, playing off him and being able to counter-attack from running up the pitch in the right wing. He's not blistering quick the same way that Tuneki is. He is quick. He's not an out-and-out winger, which is my main hesitation for him, because he's maybe a bit closer to Tate, and even for a lot of times in his Girona career, he's actually played the exact same position that McGregor's played, and Girona had those types of problems with Martín in this position that Celtic do with McGregor. But again, you know, so he's a very versatile player and could really play like anywhere we would want to play him. But if we were to sign him in January, we could just say, listen, you're going to be playing right wing for us, and you're going to be doing the Daizen Maeda shift. And again, he would grab at this with two hands, and he'd be an excellent addition into our squad. This is a player who's still at Girona, a very important player for them, and anytime he's been linked away, it's to other like good teams in La Liga. It's not like Barcelona and stuff like that, of course, but other teams that normally compete into the top 4, the top 5 of the table, rather than Girona, who'd done it once as a flash in the pan, if you get me. So a player that domestically in Spain, very, very well recognised as being a top-end operator, very good progressive and very good pressing attacking midfielder, right winger. The transfer value at the moment is €6 million. I would pay that, no problem at all. He's 26 years of age. He's very much in the prime of his career. Does have a few years left on his contract, but again, I think the way that Girona are in a real state of flux, that, you know, if they were to get 6 to 10 million euros for Martín, they would probably take it to then go down the whole, the whole FFP stuff and all the rest of it. It's a guy that they paid next to nothing for themselves a few years ago from Villarreal, 2 million euros. So if they could make some good profit on that, I think they'd bite your hands off. Because with the transformation in their squad, he's not like nailed on the same way that he used to. And that's just a change of tides and manager. Well, the manager's not changed, but him changing his tactics and his philosophy. More players getting brought in for bigger wages. There's more pressure to get them integrated and get them working. And Martín is, you know, with maybe an injury or two maybe in the mix as well, is just kind of fallen off the radar a little bit. So again, a guy that's primed to be brought in. Now, the reason I said that these two guys are very closely linked, Martín is left-footed, or Ivan Martín is left-footed, so even if you think about that Roger style, if he wants guys that can cut in and stuff like that, he can very much do it, although he's not an out-and-out winger, although he can play there like we spoke about. But the other guy, I just quite genuinely, like, this is Ivan Martín, I just quite cannot believe that these two guys are not related. Andrés Martín is a player that we have nominated on the channel a bunch of times, still has not went anywhere, still has not been signed by anyone, is still scoring and assisting every single week. And this is a guy, again, that is a right winger with a left foot, an unadulterated, unapologetic, Spanish attacking right winger that loves to cut inside on his left foot and hit bangers and hit crosses and do all that stuff that we want. He is also 26 years of age. Should we sign both the Martins? I'm not too sure, but let's imagine that we only signed one. I think Ivan Martín and Andrés Martín might actually not have too dissimilar of a transfer value, because for Racing Santander in the Segunda Division, La Liga 2, that's like their whole attack, isn't it? So they're not going to let him go for a fiver. He is only currently rated at 4 million euros on Transfermarkt, which is interesting, but I just think the reality of it, January transfer window, etc. Part of the thing that gives me extra confidence with all of these nominations in the video is that we're currently in the Europa League, and I think all of these guys could affect the Europa League, you know, the way it goes if we were to get through the group and we need these players still, or even you're thinking about that worst case scenario, which is where we find ourselves. Could they at least be effective at this level? Which they could. But Andrés Martín is, alongside McGlynn and previously with Obed Vargas, just absolutely what we need. Absolutely, no question about it. A player that we should be pursuing, we should be looking to bring in. A guy that wants to play charging down the right wing here, cuts in on his left, wants to play with a very attack-minded team. And a guy that has techers, is like genuinely, like I say this with Kyogo when we signed him, Balikwisha, let's see him obviously develop, and Negren as well when he's come in. But guys that have really tangible, proof in the pudding, top of the food chain level output in one of the reputable leagues across the world. And I know it's the second division in Spain, and you might be thinking, oh, it's just, you know, but these leagues produce really good players, and we spoke about it enough on the channel. I'm not going to like be the broken record and go through the tail of the tape of all the players in the last 3 years that have come out of these divisions. And yes, you do get worried a little bit when these guys are left in those divisions for a little bit long, like why hasn't someone else went and picked them up? But sometimes it's people have better options, sometimes people have more money, and we are maybe in the position of we are trying to find those diamonds in the rough. And I genuinely think every player we've featured in this video today would be able to fix the two problem positions we have. Andrés Martín for me would be the #1 right wing target we should be looking to bring in, and would definitely just elevate the entire front line for us in terms of that attacking cutting edge that we don't have. And as much as I'd love us to sign like an Obed Vargas or a Tetrawe or a Jack McGlynn or something like that, even Martín, honestly, if Celtic went and signed Nicolás Acevedo in the January window for, let's call it 4 million euros, and we went and got Andrés Martín in the January window for, I'm going to say 7 million euros, 6 million euros, our immediate on the pitch problems, I think, evaporate very, very quickly. And this is with the domino effect of no Daizen Maeda, no Paulo Bernardo. Do you want to think about Shin, Inamura and Yang as being an element in all this? I don't know, probably not. Are we stronger without Daizen Maeda? It's very hard to say that or get behind that, of course, but we do believe that we've got better football ability on the left-hand side, and we just have nothing at the moment on the right. Yes, we're trying to push Daizen into that inside forward role that someone like Ivan Martín could also come in and do in some ways. or even Negren, who's already at the squad, but I think we've already seen it from Rodgers. He wants that. He wants wingers. He wants guys that are going to cut teams open down the side of the pitch, and adding another player like Martín in here, it's hard to say that it's going to make the left side better, but it is a department, it is a unit where if Martín is able to do this type of stuff, you're going to get more out of Balikwisha, you're going to get more out of Tuneke, you're going to get more out of the other players in the team as a result. So I don't want to say this would make the team better after the little domino effect, but I think it fixes all of our problems, and I don't think you need to break the bank to do it at all. I don't even think for some of these transfers you would even need to send the email to the board to get the approval. Brendan Rodgers, the transfer department, you could probably just run out and buy Acevedo and probably Ivan Martín. You could probably squeeze both of those deals in without sending an email out there. And although Andrés Martín is the one to really go for it, and I'd probably even say Jack McGlynn as well, if we're maybe going to have one out of one category and one out of the other, I would want the forward to be, no compromise, no second choices. Get the best guy we possibly can at the price range, and it'll be really interesting to see with, especially with Celtic in the minutes saying like we refute that question and we are ID and Champions League players, etc. They're putting a lot of pressure on themselves to nail this business in the January window. And it'll be really interesting to see how they go about doing that. And I'm not too sure whether the Europa League success should have any bearing on the business we do, because, again, if you're thinking about Maeda leaves in January, maybe Hatate leaves in the summer, the transfer department, the club, have got to be looking at this at bird's eye view of really forget this season, win the league, get back into the Champions League, and then what's the squad we have then? That's the thing that they've got to be thinking about, which is why I wanted to knock some dominoes down that we might see in January. But even if you're to knock down maybe some of those summer dominoes where Hatate could leave, maybe Alistair Johnson could leave, who knows what happens with Sriracha. And I wouldn't really rule out something like Trusty maybe leaving. We don't expect, but we know Schmeichel is out of contract after the World Cup. We've maybe got a bit more meat on the bone for a future topic, thinking about this when we get to the summer window after the next January one closes. So I look forward to grasping that with all of you guys as we get to it. But yeah, for at the moment, we've got 2 transfers to fix Celtic. I'm going with a defensive midfielder. I'm going with a right winger. And I think these 2 players that I've ID'd and even all the ones that we featured in the video today would absolutely fit the bill. And it'll be really interesting to see what your guys' suggestions are down in the comments section down below, as well as what Celtic actually come up with. On screen and now some other stuff that I've made that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. If you haven't done so already, please do hit like and subscribe for more content like this. Hail, hail, and Mon the Hoops.